So now we come to the end of it. We have seen the excellent surgery performed by Dr. Ramakant, Bankart repair with remplissage. We have seen a couple of other talks talking about the decision making. So I'm going to put up my little experience, whatever I have in few years, that why do Bankarts fail? Some have failed in my own hands and some we have seen from others. So if we want to understand how does it fail, you must understand what will make it successful. How do we define a failure? So when you say my Bankart is successful, then it means it should become exactly what it was before. So no feeling of instability, no frank dislocation, no subluxations, no apprehension at all. Patient must get the full range of motion. Patient must get the normal range of motion and the strength, and patient must go back to his level of activity where he was. Only if these, in my view, if this happens, then you can say the surgery was successful. So normally, most surgeons who do well, this is what they take in account when they do the Bankart repair. So typically, so now Amit has, brought in a lot of points in favor of this. I'll just keep a very simple guideline. Generally speaking, in a patient who's got bone loss less than 20%, I'm not bringing this 13.5 at the moment, or a bony Bankart lesion which is repairable with an on-track Hill-Sachs lesion and a repairable labrum, you need to do a good anterior labrocapsular repair, use appropriate anchors, 3 or more, address all other lesions if they are present, a very structured rehab, ensure nothing impairs the healing, including smoking and tobacco chewing or any other factor. And lastly, return to sports after the due assessment. And that makes, generally speaking, a good, successful outcome. The overall results of isolated Bankart repair, if you see, even in the good hands, it can vary up to, including everything, it can go up to 22%. And subtle instability can vary in about 16% patient. So the question comes, why these Bankarts, they fail? Now, I'll put up some common points which are coming across the studies and everybody agrees to that, and then we'll take some important points. So generally speaking, the younger patients who are less than 22, male gender, the ones who have shoulder laxity, those who intend to return to the overhead sports, contact sports or athletic activity, or they use tobacco or smoking, with a bone loss of more than 20 to 25%, there is some evidence that the GLADs and APSA, especially the GLAD, may not do as well as the typical Bankart or APSA, and bipolar and off-track lesion. If they are, especially the off-track lesion has been left unattended, this can lead to the Bankart surgery failure. So there are 3 ways things can go wrong. Pre-operative, your decision making itself is wrong. Some things happened intra-op, and what happened post-operatively. So the first and foremost primary things which can go wrong pre-operatively is you made a wrong decision of doing a surgery which was never indicated. So performing a Bankart repair in a patient more than 20%. Now I'm not bringing again 13.5% here, I'm just keeping a very larger guideline more than 20 to 25%. Or a lesser bone loss in a patient who goes to the contact sport. So 17% bone loss in a wrestler is not same as 17% bone loss in an engineer or a person who is sitting in an office and not playing the sport. So 17% non-contact sports person can be managed with Bankart, whereas 17%, 18% in a wrestler or a kabaddi player has to be probably go ahead with the Letaje. Second is so when to abandon the arthroscopic Bankart repair, there's a systematic review. It says if the arthroscopic Bankart repair is successful, if the glenoid bone loss is less than 15% and Hill-Sachs lesion is on track. Means anything beyond 15 starts increasing the chance of failure. Chance of failure does not mean that it will fail, the chances increase. This is another systematic review which involved 528 patients and said more than ROC analysis says that the minute it is more than 16% glenoid bone loss, there's a prediction of recurrence. Another study which took about almost 3,000 patients and said male younger than 20 Hill-Sachs lesion, off-track lesions are predictor for recurrence. So any off-track lesion you must not ignore. At the moment, we have only one factor in our armamentarium. If you are managing soft tissue wise is doing the remplissage. Then coming to missing a lesion, you miss the lesion. Now miss the lesion shall not cause a recurrence, but it can lead to a poorer outcome, especially the, let's say the slabs or posterior labrum or the cartilage lesion. Patient can continue to have a lot of pain. Nobody generally operates a voluntary dislocator, but by chance if you missed, then the patient will have recurrence. Intraoperative errors, preparation related, we saw how Dr. Ramankant was, elegantly liberating the labrum. So the first and foremost step is adequate liberation of the anteroinferior labrum. And if you did not prepare the glenoid margin, now that remains a bit controversial. Dr. Sanjay Desai has got a paper on this where they did not curated the margin versus they did curate the margin, and they found that there's a 15% versus 33% recurrence in curettage versus non-curettage group. So it's prudent probably, to just take away about 1 millimeter of the cartilage and, let the labrum heal onto the bone. Makes a sense. Attaching the capsulolabral complex on the neck, not so you are supposed to attach it here. If you end up attaching it more medially, then it can lead to a poor tensioning. Inadequate tensioning of the capsulolabral complex repaired a poor labrum quality. So this patient, when we went inside, we realized that the labrum was extremely poor. So this patient, we actually ended up doing the Latage procedure. So that's why I said we were discussing this. So when you're doing a Bankart, you can actually liberate the labrum completely. And there itself, you assess how is the labrum quality. If it is a very poor quality, you can abandon the procedure straight away rather than repairing something very poor. Anchor related, so you chose in a wrong place. So this one is the standard. So the most inferior, then after that, at least 2 more, which reaches the level of the equator. You end up putting in a wrong place or lesser in number, you place only 1 or 2 because you're not technically confident. That can lead to problem. Poor knotting technique or a proud or loose anchors. Post-op errors, I'll take 2 more minutes, is that okay? Post-op errors, rehabilitation related, poorly executive rehab or a very aggressive rehab, factors which are affecting the healing or a re-trauma or a fall. Now re-trauma I would not call a reason for failure of your surgery. It has nothing to do with your surgery. Your surgery would have been excellent, but a trauma can cause a failure or an epilepsy. So what do we do strategies to minimize the failure? So pre-operative, soft tissue or bony procedure, what is fit for your patient. Select that. Glenoid bone loss is not yet a very fixed point. Yes, more than 25 is 100%, but anything less than that depends upon patient to patient. Don't miss a pathology. Correct all deficiencies what you can beforehand and avoid operating on a voluntary dislocator. Intraoperative, elevate the complex perfectly. Ready to change the primary plan. If you feel that it's a very bad quality capsule, don't go ahead and repair and then, regret later. You can change it. A minimum of 3 anchors or more, especially the inferior one. Appropriate tensioning, perfect knotting, add remplissage in an off track or lesser distance to dislocation. So that's a new concept which is coming up. So an on track lesion can still have a very short distance to dislocation. And add adjunct procedure if capsulolabral repair is weak. I put it in a green, means it is yet to be evaluated. There's no perfect evidence for this. Post-op, a structured rehab and return to appropriate sports or occupation only after the due assessment. Thank you very much for your attention.